So welcome everyone. It really is fantastic to have each one of you with us on today's webinar entitled, What Does Career Mean in College and Career Ready? My name is John Branham and I'm Grantmakers for Education's Deputy Director. Today's webinar, however, is brought to you by GFE in partnership with our Education Policy Working Group. GFE's mission is to strengthen philanthropy's capacity to improve education outcomes for all learners, an effort we accomplish by offering impactful place-based and need-based programming, knowledge products such as benchmarking, which provides data analysis on the latest trends in education philanthropy. GFE's 2012 benchmarking report highlights that nearly 60% of funders cite alignment of the education pipeline, including 40% of grant makers investing in school-to-career pathways, as an important organizational goal. The most common point of focus along the education pipeline was the transition from high school to post-secondary education. Although benchmarking is critical to helping us better serve our members, you can find other helpful reports available for download on our website at www.edfunders.org. Within GFE, we have 3 funder networks designed to bring together grant makers who fund specific areas of education reform. And as mentioned earlier, today's webinar is brought to you by our Education Policy Working Group. The Education Policy Working Group exists to deepen grant makers' knowledge around the education policy-related strategies grant makers can employ to dramatically improve outcomes for all students. Consistent with this strategy, the EPWG network develops meaningful opportunities for funders to learn and connect with each other as they explore these strategies and share effective practices with each other. At a time when more education funders than ever are appreciating the value of engaging in education policy, EPWG's efforts are unique and valuable. All GFE members are invited to become a member of the Education Policy Working Group, and if you'd like to do so, please contact GFE's Program and Network Manager, Kimberlyn Butler, at kimberlyn@edfunders.org. Before jumping into our presentation, let me take just a minute to highlight a few of the webinar platform's key elements. Because the lines will be muted, you can easily submit questions throughout the presentation by using the Chat with Presenter dialog box in the left panel of your screen. Kimberlyn will be fielding questions for speakers and passing them along to the moderator. You may also raise your hand if you would like the moderator to chat directly with you regarding a particular question. And alternatively, Kimberlyn can also chat directly with you. Finally, for a better viewing experience, please feel free to select full screen in the top right corner of your page. If at any time during the webinar you have logistical challenges, please dial 1-800-246-1442 and provide access code 595-2100 for immediate assistance. This number and access code can also be found in your invitation. At the end of today's presentation, the full web and audio file will be available. We will also post slides and a recording of the webinar on GFE's website. Let me also take just 1 minute to thank today's presenters, including Gary Hoechlander of Connect Ed and Jay Banfield of Year Up. Again, thank you all for joining us, and with that, let me turn the virtual baton over to Ann Stanton of the James Irvine Foundation, today's moderator. Thanks, Ann.
Thank you, John. It's really happy to be here and privileged to be moderating what I think is such an important discussion for all of us. Let me say a couple of words about why I might have been asked to moderate this panel, and in part I think it has to do with the question of college and career ready is really central to the work that we at the Foundation and with our grantee partners in California are doing, and very, very much focused. We are a statewide funder, and the goal of our youth program is to increase the number of low-income youth in California who graduate high school on time and receive a post-secondary credential by the time they're 24. At the center of our work and the promising strategies that we're investing in is really exploring models that truly integrate the aspects of academic rigor and with equal importance understand the role of professional career and technical education in helping us build approaches that better understand and advance the fact that college and career are stronger together than they could ever be separately. So we have been working on for a number of years on a strategy which we believe is highly promising, which is called Linked Learning in California. At its essence, Linked Learning integrates real-world professions with rigorous academics. It transforms education, we hope, into a personally relevant, wholly engaging experience for every student, and thereby opening students to career and college opportunities that they might not have ever imagined. So for me, very, very important and I think terrific to be able to moderate this panel. I think that the work that we're doing is really reflects a nationwide, drive and consensus that we need to ensure that all students graduate from high school ready for both college and career. Central to that question is, what should students be able to do upon graduation that equips them for success in post-secondary education and career? And so central question as we're talking today is about, what does college and career ready really mean? And I think there is a general sense that we have many frameworks that have been established over a number of years for defining the college part of the equation. But frankly, we've all been less attentive to really digging in and understanding the career ready part of it. So very, very excited today to have a chance to consider some frameworks for defining the career part. I think it's a timely conversation as we look at national assessment, and in California we're really looking at how do we build out the API to really capture both the career and college ready side of the work. Clearly a huge nationwide drive in terms of Common Core. We would believe that the work that we are doing in linked learning, and as you'll hear more from the key leaders in the field, part of it is really understanding that we believe that these kind of approaches, if done at scale, can really enable us to be, if the Common Core is the what, this is the how for how we get there. And clearly, obviously, very timely in light of the Secretary of Education and the President's focus on the redesign of high schools. So I'm really thrilled to be here and to be able to introduce who I think are two amazing experts and speakers in this arena. Want to call out from the beginning that what we're seeing in the conversations the presentations as well as the conversations, is Gary will really focus on strategies and approaches that have been developed really with young people and target populations for keeping young people connected that are already on the educational pipeline, both through high school to graduation and beyond into post-secondary. And Jay from Europe is really going to talk about the groundbreaking work they're doing with young people who are more what we would categorize now as opportunity youth, those that have been out of the education pipeline are finding ways to connect. So really the issue of recovery and how this focus on college and career can advance that work. The other thing I would point out with both of these presenters, and I say as Grantmakers for Education, where we often look at the education side of the house and talk to educators about our work, both Gary and Jay are really amazing resources for helping us to think through what we need to do in terms of involving industry in this conversation. We can't get to college and career ready without having industry as full partners in this work. So with that, I am really excited to be able to introduce Gary Hochländer is our first presenter. We hope that we are going to get a little bit of a sense before we start and put out one polling question so we have a good sense of who's on the call with us. So if you can look at the poll question that's coming up, just a sense of who among our listeners are currently investing in school to career pathways. So if folks could just weigh in on that question, that would be great. So I think responses are coming in, and we've got a pretty even distribution of those who are investing in school to career pathways and those who are not yet. Great, thank you. So that's very helpful, I think, for both Gary and Jay as we get started in the conversation, and for all of us to know, at least as a starting point, where we are in terms of our connective tissue. So I want to provide a very brief introduction to Gary. I know everybody has bios for both of the speakers that are on the call today. Gary Hochelander is the president of ConnectEd, the California Center for College and Career. When the Irvine Foundation launched its work around linked learning close to 10 years ago, Gary was a strong partner in thought, and we also launched ConnectEd as an organization to really lead the work in California and to begin to help us develop a new vision for what college and career ready looked like in terms of the work on the ground. Most also very heavy focus on policy and the policies that need to be in place to support this work going forward. And one thing I can honestly say in California is we have a movement that is being driven by a very surprising alliance of folks, from industry to parents to students to educators to policymakers. And Gary and his organization, ConnectEd, have really been at the center of that. So with no more words, just to say huge respect and admiration for Gary, and I think you will agree with me how much he has to offer to this conversation. So Gary?
Thank you, Ann, and hello, everybody. I'm really delighted to be able to share some of our thinking about college and career readiness with all of you and get your input on this. Nobody has this all figured out yet, but we've been working hard on it. And I think as a place to start, and one takeaway that I hope everybody gets from this is, while we want to focus on career aspects today, as Ann indicated, I think the real opportunity here is to exploit the integration of college and career and to stop talking about these in isolation from each other. So I'm going to be doing both today. And I hope, actually, in doing so, that we will emerge with a deeper understanding of not only career readiness, but college readiness. As we begin to think about the intersection between college and career readiness, it may very well deeply change the way we've been thinking about college readiness. So there's an old paradigm. Under the old paradigm, career ready meant really job training. It was occupationally specific. If you think of traditional vocational education or career and technical education, certainly employment training was highly occupationally specific. It tended to prepare students for entry-level work. Rarely, particularly at the high school level, was there much attention to career opportunities beyond entry-level placement. And in some cases, in some program areas, there was attention to formal occupational certification. So in health careers, for example, it was quite common for students to emerge with a certificate, a certified nursing assistant, for example, or a certificate in phlebotomy. In contrast, we talked about college ready, primarily in terms of the college prep curriculum. So students preparing, particularly for four-year college and university, were expected to take honors classes, AP courses. Almost inevitably, they had to take either the SAT or the ACT, and GPA figured very prominently in the admissions policies, particularly of selective four-year post-secondary institutions. I think the difficulty with that approach is that it immediately ignores a lot of things that we want students to know and be able to do for further success in education, in career, and in life. We here at ConnectEd began sort of struggling with, okay, college and career readiness is not simply college plus career. It's not that old paradigm of let's take sort of what we think means to be college ready, add to it some notions about career, and we will have addressed, this question that has been really challenging us all is what do we mean by college and career readiness. And so we began with a number of partners, the National Academy Foundation, the Career Academy Support Network, Svetlana Darsh at West Ed, to wrestle with a new approach to college and career readiness. And we developed this framework, which is available on our website. I should acknowledge that we have a deep debt of gratitude to lots of folks who've gone before us, including SCANS, the Secretary's Commission on Necessary Skills, the 21st Century Skills folks, Achieve, certainly, the National Association of State Directors for Career and Technical Education, and I think in particular David Conley, whose work on both college and career readiness has influenced us deeply. What emerged from this was a framework that really sought to be much more comprehensive and began to raise questions about, or really answers to, what is it that we want students to know and be able to do upon leaving high school, so that we began to pay attention to things like digital competency and information management, the understanding of systems, the difference between open and closed systems, the role of input, throughput, feedback. We want students to be technologically literate, and I don't mean simply able to use technology, but understand the underlying principles of technology in many different forms. We want students to be able to communicate in much more broadly defined ways than simply being able to read and write. We want students to be economically literate. We'd like to have students really engage in ethics and understand the difference between personal, professional, organizational ethics. These are just some of the things that really have been missing from the conversation. And this framework was an effort to begin to organize that discussion in a somewhat more structured and coherent way. And so we've tried in this framework to distinguish different kinds of knowledge. So yes, core academic knowledge, certainly proficiency in English language arts, mathematics, science, social studies, foreign language, but also attention to global and civic knowledge, financial knowledge, understanding of media. On the skills side, certainly attention to academic skills and technical skills, but also, as I indicated, really helping students master a better understanding of systems thinking, communication, critical thinking. I mentioned David Conley, and I think he was very influential in starting to get all of us to think about the importance of what we call sort of productive dispositions and behaviors. So students' self-concept, their ability to manage themselves in their own time. In the sort of career world, we paid attention to, for many, many years, to certain kinds of sort of employment skills, being able to dress well, appropriate, the attention to the importance of being on time. Those are fairly low-level examples of a much larger set of sort of social and organizational behaviors that are really, really important. And then finally, and again, have to give a lot of credit to David Conley on this front as well, really paying attention to building students' capacity to navigate the world of post-secondary education, the world of work, and the world of civic affairs. This framework we use with schools and districts to develop a graduate profile. We want very much for districts to begin thinking about what it is that they want students to know and be able to do graduating from high school that truly prepares them for ongoing success in further education, in career, and in civic life. It's part of, we put a very high emphasis on taking a systemic approach to school improvement, and in order to encourage that, it's critically important from our perspective to start with a good sense of what are the outcomes that we want an integrated approach to teaching and learning to produce. We encourage districts as they formulate these graduate profiles to pay close attention to 21st century knowledge and skills. We want these profiles to be specific, measurable. They should be certainly benefit from the input, if not validation, by industry advisors and community stakeholders. And it results in a clear, articulate statement of what it is that the district hopes that graduates will know and be able to do when they leave. This is an example from Montebello Unified School District. It's illustrative. Different districts take different approaches, but it gives you a sense of what we mean by a graduate profile. So how do we accomplish this? So here in California, as Ann indicated, we've been helping districts and schools to design and implement systems of linked learning pathways to college and career. There's no one right way to do this. There are theme-based high schools, there are California Partnership Academies, career academies, academies that are supported by the National Academy Foundation, theme-based small learning communities. But whatever the approach, a linked learning pathway consists of four essential features. And the first is a college preparatory academic core, the math, the science, the English, the social studies that students need to succeed in further education. There's a technical core, a series or clusters of 3 or more courses providing industry knowledge and skill, and in some cases still offering students the opportunity to obtain a formal certification. There's formal work-based learning, and then personalized student supports, particularly supplemental instruction in reading, writing, and mathematics. These pathways are organized around major industry themes like agriculture and natural resources, law and justice, biomedical and health science, architecture, construction, and engineering, to give you just a few examples. And to illustrate, I think, what we mean by the integration of academic and technical. In the academic courses, the core academics, the math, the science, the English, the social studies, there is much greater emphasis on real-world application. So for example, in a pathway in architecture, construction, engineering, in a geometry class, there is systematic attention to how geometry is used in the world of construction and engineering. For example, the role that the Pythagorean theorem, the 3-4-5 triangle, plays in framing a house, or the role that trigonometry plays in designing and building roof trusses, the role that calculus plays in designing a seismically safe bay bridge. It's not simply that students continue to be exposed to college-ready academics, but linked learning is as much about changing the way we teach the core academics as it is about providing a really challenging technical base and the opportunity to engage in work-based learning. On the technical side, again, sticking with the architecture, construction, and engineering, in the cluster of technical courses, students will be learning things like principles of engineering, principles of design. They might be introduced, for example, to the sort of classic 10 principles for good design that were developed by Dieter Rams, who is sort of one of the foremost industrial designers working for Braun, among others, in the 70s and 80s. In addition, instruction is it heavily emphasizes project-based learning and work-based learning, and ideally these two things interacting together so that students have the opportunity to address sort of real-world problems through interdisciplinary projects that are standards-driven and result in students having to demonstrate, not just in written form, that's part of it, but their understanding of these cross-disciplinary challenges. One of, I think, the most important features of a well-designed linked learning approach is attention to work-based learning. And by that, we don't mean work experience. That's useful, that's important, but rather really deep interaction between students and working adults around identifying and solving real-world problems in a workplace environment. Work-based learning can take a number of different strategies: mentoring and job shadowing, paid and unpaid internships, group internships, virtual apprenticeship, where students are responding to design challenges that have been posed by engineers, for example, who then assess student work to industry standards. It can take the form of school-based enterprise, where students are actually operating businesses and other enterprises. I think the most important thing to emphasize about work-based learning is that it too needs to be connected to the classroom experience. So that, for example, in a health occupations pathway, students may in the morning be at a place like Kaiser Permanente, can be part of a group internship. Their teacher is there working side by side with a physician's assistant provided by Kaiser. They might be learning, for example, how to do electrocardiograms. They're working with real patients, working side by side with a physician's assistant to interpret those results. That same day in the afternoon, they're back in their AP biology class, their biomedical class, and they're learning about the human cardiovascular system and the role that electricity plays in regulating the human heart, and how heart disease interferes with that system. So there's this direct connection between very hands-on applied opportunity in the workplace in the morning with really very sophisticated biology concepts, knowledge in their biomedical class in the afternoon. Again, this integration between college and career, between classroom-based and work-based learning. If you'd like to have, I think, get a better an understanding of the role of work-based learning in linked learning, in career pathways, in academies, I'd really urge you to check out these two publications, Preparing Youth for Life. It's available from NAF.org, as well as the Career Practicum document, which really sets a framework for work-based learning writ large and its integration with the classroom. And that you can get from the linklearning.org website. So in summary, while there certainly are unique features of college readiness versus career readiness, from my perspective, the really exciting opportunities for engaging and motivating young people lie in the intersection, the and in college and career. And as I think we begin to exploit that intersection, we really blur this distinction between college and career ready as sort of separate, isolated components, and begin to not only talk about readiness in a much more integrated way, but develop the kind of learning experiences that also integrate college and career, classroom and work in really effective, coherent, compelling ways. So if you want to learn more, please visit our website, and I look forward to having an opportunity to engage in the rest of the conversation today. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Gary. And I think we are going to move to the opportunity for to really have others that are participating with us on this webinar have some questions. So I want to open it to the field and to begin to, if there are questions that we have of Gary, please let us know what they are. We give it a couple more minutes to let people type in questions that they have. Well, Gary, you must have been extraordinarily clear to everybody in your presentation, because no questions are coming up at this juncture. So what might be great for us to do is move forward, and let me go forward and introduce Jay. And I think that will also perhaps open some opportunities for dialogue based on the two presentations. So again, as with Gary, it is a huge privilege to introduce our next presenter, Jay Banfield, who's founding executive director of Europe of the Bay Area, a key grantee partner of ours at the foundation. Again, want to make a slight distinction in that the work of Europe, which is nationwide, has been, I think, catalytic in closing the opportunity divide for young people that are no longer connected to education, basically providing pathways certainly out of poverty for urban young adults, and providing the skill development, the real-world experiences, and the supports both academically and from a student sort of counseling perspective that are having huge difference in the lives of young people across the nation, and certainly in California. The other aspect that I know Jay will touch on because of his the rich partnership that I think Europe has, not only with the young people that it works with in the educational systems like community colleges, but also very, very importantly with the folks without whom this would not be possible, which is the real industry partners that they have been able to engage with, and who in partnership with Europe are being able to provide the key experiences that young people have. And I think it's at that crux of understanding the intersection of what industry leaders want, what education is producing, and how we better support young people to be on pathways that lead to ultimate success is part of, I think, the Europe story. So I want, with great respect and admiration, want to introduce Jay Banfield to begin his presentation.
Great, and thank you very much, and I will do my level best to be less clear than Gary to prompt more questions. But it's really my pleasure to be here, I guess now this afternoon, to talk about this very important subject. And really I will think about it from the lens of Europe, but also trying to then think about what are the broadly applicable themes that we should be highlighting. I'm thinking about Ann's introductory comments and Gary's, and I think there are two common threads that you will hear. Certainly the importance of including industry in the solution to the problem is critical, and certainly something that we see every day. And I think about Gary's point about the integration of college, education, and careers as both being incredibly important. When we think about career readiness, at least from my point of view, start to think about what are we training people for, and are there jobs and careers for young adults? That's our focus, but for people looking for opportunities, do they exist? And I think it's very important to recognize the skills gap that we see in our country is something that is felt by industry partners. As Ann mentioned, we're a national organization and we serve more than 250 companies. And you can look at the need and the skills gap in lots of different ways. One is that if you were right now, there are more than 3 million jobs that are open in our country. Certainly we look at research that look at the middle skills gap of 14 million people that we're going to need over the next decade with skills more than a high school diploma but less than a 4-year degree. So lots of different ways that you can slice the pie to see that there really is a need that's recognized by the private sector as well. When we think about our work, we always want to bring ourselves back to the people that we serve, and for Year Up, it is 18 to 24-year-olds, as Ann mentioned, who are disconnected from the economic mainstream. And always try to remind ourselves to begin with, the most important building blocks of the recognition of talent and the belief in the talent of young adults in our country. And when I say that, when we think about talent, and I'll come back to this wheel, really thinking about starting from talent and moving around the wheel to success, we'll kind of come back to this diagram as a touchstone for us throughout the presentation. But what I think is really interesting in what we're finding with our corporate partners is that the skills gap is real, and certainly we see a lot of discussion about STEM and technology careers and skills that are lacking with young people in our country. But what's also interesting is that companies are searching for different skill sets. They're looking for people who are motivated, who are adaptable, who are perseverant. So I think about a lot of the topics that Gary touched on in his presentation. We're seeing a greater and greater recognition among our corporate partners that those skills, those non-cognitive skills, are incredibly important, and that the technical skills are almost a threshold that you have to meet, but what really differentiates the young adults that we serve are those skills. And so really I think the job that we have more broadly is to have companies recognize talent in different ways, and how to recognize that some of the challenges that young adults face in our country really are competitive advantages, and really give them the strength to be perseverant and motivated, to display grit and determination, and that we have an obligation to let our young adults know that those skills will create a competitive advantage for them in the marketplace. And I think that's incredibly important as we think about this discussion. So the first threshold is recognizing that those skills are important. It's not just the technical skills, but those non-cognitive skills, and that there has to be a real belief in the talent of the young adults that we are trying to serve. And if we think about the 6.7 million opportunity youth, if we think about dislocated workers, there really has to be, I think, an engaged effort with nonprofits, with the philanthropic community, to really think about perception change, and really trying to get people to shift their ideas of what talent means in this new economy. So if we move from talent and belief, we really feel strongly, and we see this on a daily basis, about the importance of high support and high expectations. For us, it's a combination of social workers, mentors, advisors, tutors, combined with the importance of feedback. So Gary talked about the importance of feedback. At Year Up, we provide stipends to our students so that we're able to remove the financial barriers to participation, having contracts in place. Really this combination of that there's no greater respect that any of us on this call can pay to a young person than to say, we believe in you, and we're going to set the bar high and hold you accountable. And I think that we, in all of our work, have seen that when the expectations are set low, we'll see people live down to them. And I think we, as a collaborative, need to be setting the expectations high, and we need to create mechanisms to provide feedback and hold our young people accountable to high standards. We think that's incredibly important, and see that throughout our work. So if you take talent, you recognize talent, the real true belief in the potential of a young person, combining it with high support, high expectations, and then what are the skills that we want to be training for? So if we take some of these, these non-cognitive skills, what are we layering on top of that? The idea of linked learning, and you heard that both from Ann and from Gary, I think is incredibly important, that we are training people for jobs that currently exist. But I think even more importantly is we need to be developing the mechanisms and the muscles to understand where the market is going. So if we think about linked learning, it's combining what are the skills that companies are looking for both on the cognitive and non-cognitive sides, what are the technical skills that they're looking for, and then combining it with real-world experience and combining it with the internship apprenticeship model. For us, we spend 6 months with our young adults in a training, both in the hard and the soft skills, really focus, and we'll hear from employers over and over again that it is that the soft skills are some of the hardest to train for, and so that's what they're really searching for and hiring for. The students will then finish their first 6 months, and they'll spend 6 months applying what they've learned in a real-world setting. So Gary used that example of Casa Permanente. That is one of our corporate partners, as it turns out. And students are taking what they've learned in a classroom setting, and they're applying it with mentors. They're applying it with people who are role models for them, which is incredibly important for developing that motivation and that perseverance. Because I think the importance to me of linked learning is that it really demonstrates to a young person why it is they're going to school. I think that as a country, we tend to ask an awful lot of young people who are coming from under-resourced communities to delay gratification when young adults are thinking about where they're going to lay their head to rest and where they're going to get their next meal, to be thinking about going to school, working hard, that they're going to go to college and then they get a job, and that there's this American dream is out there. It's so far out there for so many young people that I think it's really important for all of us on this call to think about how do we make that real, that I think young people can understand those words, but then they need to see real examples of that. They need to see role models within their communities, and they need to see professionals who demonstrated that path, that it's real for them. So when that internship phase, it's really about them getting a real shot to prove themselves. And I think this is the point I was alluding to earlier, is that for so many young people, the idea of a real pathway, I think we need to challenge ourselves to be identifying multiple pathways, so that when a young adult finishes high school, or a young adult finishes a program like Year Up, that there are legitimate career and educational pathways that are available to them. At Year Up, when students join us, they are enrolled in community college. So Ann alluded to this, where we're trying to connect them to both the workforce but also to post-secondary education, so they can finish our program with some kind of piece of paper that will allow them to move forward and provide some positive momentum for them. But I think one of the things that I see more often than not is the idea that we have to paint a real clear picture for young people, that we have to layer as many caring adults around our young people as possible to show them in both as mentors and advisors, as supervisors in the workplace, to show them that these pathways are available to them. And that's, I think, an important piece of the puzzle as we think about trying to solve this on a large scale. And what I think is very encouraging, if we think about kind of more what are the lessons that we can take away from the work that we see on a daily basis, is that companies are very interested in participating in this conversation. Companies are invested in trying to solve this problem. So if we take this talent and belief, we layer on high support, high expectations, we then take and add hard and soft skills with a college partner, providing a real opportunity for people to do an internship and to prove themselves. And in the back end of that comes true success and true partnership. And so this picture is one of our most recent graduates with the CIO of eBay, who was the keynote speaker. And I think this is obviously a great day for Ashley and for Scott. But I think it represents what I think is a true opportunity for us to be creating an ecosystem that is with the private sector, the public sector, with nonprofits and philanthropic partners, that we think about this disconnect, this breakdown that we see in the labor market of companies that are looking for talent and talented young people looking for opportunities. And why is it these two groups aren't connecting as efficiently and as effectively as possible? And I see a great opportunity for an ecosystem to be created where we realign those systems and we allow for the private sector to be able to communicate very clearly to workforce development programs, to our educational system. And what I see is a grand bargain that can really be struck between the two groups, where we say to companies, we need to understand what it is that you're looking for now and in the immediate future, 6 months, a year's time. And we need you to create a space to be a part of the educational system where you're creating spaces for young people to come and to test out those skills, to create internship programs and apprenticeship programs. And in return, we in the educational system need to be more nimble. We need to be able to identify and to develop those soft skills, those non-cognitive skills of motivation, adaptability, perseverance, grit, and determination. We need to be more nimble in what kind of coursework we deliver in developing curriculum that meets the needs for the private sector so that they can grow to the extent that they need to. We had a really interesting conversation with the CIO of Facebook who was speaking at our launch not long ago, and I'll leave you with this comment. He said, we have never hit a hiring plan at Facebook, and it's certainly not due to lack of resources and not due to a lack of desire. It's the inability to find the talent that exists. And I see an incredible opportunity with corporate partners across the country, certainly in Silicon Valley, of sourcing and growing talent within our communities, which really is exciting. I think is exciting to us, and I think should be exciting to all of us on this call. So again, I'm really honored to be a part of this conversation and look forward to the dialogue that's to come.
Terrific. Thanks, Jay. So I think we've had, through both Gary and Jay's presentations, I think a great and rich, understanding of frameworks and ways in which people are better connecting through their work, the conversations about college and career ready, blurring those lines, purposefully blurring those lines, to get to an end for young people that is even stronger than if we address them independently. So we'll get to having a conversation among Gary and Jay through questions that folks have, but want to first give the opportunity for our participants to ask Jay some questions based on his presentation. Just as a reminder, because the lines are muted on this webinar, we just recall that you can easily submit questions throughout, now by using the Chat with Presenter dialog box that's in the left panel of your screen. And so then we can begin. Kimberlyn at GFE can field the questions that you've got, that you might have, and pass them along to me. And feel free also to raise your hand if you'd like me to chat directly with you about a specific question. But it would be great if folks have questions for Jay, comments. Great to use that left panel on your screen, Chat with Presenter, to weigh in on some of those questions or comments or thoughts.
And this is Gary. While we're waiting, Jay, I've got a question for you.
Great.
We're all deeply committed to work-based learning and expanding those kinds of opportunities for young people. Scaling it remains a huge challenge, and I wonder if you might share some of your strategies for engaging industry and corporate partners in a much more significant way.
Sure, and I'd be happy to do that. So I think there are multiple steps in that process, Gary. I think the first is to be able to create meaningful dialogue with corporate partners in creating a forum for them to share with each other and with providers of what they're looking for in the skills set. So that creating that mechanism for that feedback and capturing that information, I think, is a critical first step. When we think about scale, we think about it in a couple of different levels. One is that we are doing a couple of pilots within community colleges in both Miami and in Baltimore, where we're co-locating with community colleges so we're housed within a community college and delivered through community college instructors as a way to think about on the supply side. So that's one piece of the puzzle. I think there's incredibly interesting opportunities to leverage technology and e-learning to be able to reach more people quickly in a way to scale in significant numbers. But I think that one thing that I would see us doing more of is try to address the demand side of the equation. How do we change perceptions of companies and their hiring practices? Because I feel like if companies were clamoring for talent in different dimensions and really clamoring for those hard skills and the determination, motivation, and grit and perseverance, that systems will respond to that. So I think we really need to be addressing both sides of the equation at the same time. How do we increase our ability to serve on the supply side of in our case, young people, and how do we effectively engage the private sector so that the demand increases 100-fold? Because that's when I think that systems will respond more quickly.
So terrific. I want to share the first question, and I think we can probably address it I direct this to Gary first, which is from Claudine Feliciano. She's given the current problems with the public school system, how does this program work against the metrics faced by the public schools?
So I take that to mean...
Great question.
I think certainly, I may be reading more into the question than is appropriate, but I think that we are all concerned with the narrowing of focus around what students are expected to know and be able to do that has been generated, certainly by the very strong emphasis on standardized testing, and particularly standardized testing with respect to primarily English language arts and mathematics, to some extent also science and social studies. And not for a moment to say that those things are not important. They certainly are. They're absolutely essential, but they're not sufficient. And the kinds of metric, that focus on those metrics has really driven out of teaching and learning many of the other things that we were talking about earlier that students need to know and be able to do, both cognitively and non-cognitively. And so I think one of the reasons that we put so much emphasis on working with schools and districts to have deep and rich discussions about what we want students to know and be able to do is very much trying to broaden the way that schools, school districts, even the larger community are thinking about this, and then using that to shape curriculum, to shape instructional practice, to open up schools and bring the world of work, bring the community into the school and take the school out into those places. And so I think that this is very much, the question underscores the importance of engaging in this much larger discussion about what do we mean by college and career readiness, and thinking about both singularly and together much more broadly than we have during the past 15 or 20 years.
So one follow-up question on that, particularly I think for a number of funders, and I think that clearly we see this both at the national level, but certainly has implications as we've seen in districts across this country. So the Common Core is moving quickly upon districts across this nation, and I alluded a little bit at the beginning of how we, in many ways, the kind of work and the approaches being taken here are the how, and the Common Core being the what. Gary, can I ask you to just speak a little bit about that in relation to, and as it builds off Claudine's question too, in terms of what schools are facing on a daily basis, and certainly this is a major shift for them. So can you help us understand that a little bit more?
I'll certainly try.
Okay.
Again, the Common Core, of course, is focused primarily on English language arts, mathematics, and then through the next generation science standards, now science. The good news is that particularly in the English language arts and mathematics standards, in English language arts there's a much stronger emphasis on reading for understanding, and doing that across the curriculum. A much greater emphasis on what I might call technical literacy. The broadening of the way the English language arts standards define communication to include certainly oral communication, but nonverbal communication. All of these are things that I think create an opportunity to strengthen the connections to real-world application and advance not only linked learning but related initiatives that are really focused on helping students better understand why we need to know this. On the math side, I think the new emphasis on modeling, again, creates the opportunity to introduce a lot more attention to application. But it's important that we do this in a coherent way. It's not just simply isolated projects or isolated, disconnected examples of how math or English language arts or science get used in the real world. It's about creating a sort of consistent and coherent way for students to experience that and to connect what they're learning in, I think, a broader approach to English language arts, mathematics, and science, connect that to other academic disciplines, but also the kind of industry knowledge and skill that we were discussing earlier. So, what I love about, again, exploiting the "and" in college and career is that it creates the opportunity to make connections between the Common Core and some of the ideas that we were talking about in terms of digital competency, information management, technological literacy, ethics. I mean, I'm not sure whether those are college or career. They seem to me to be exceedingly important for success in both worlds. And making sure that we don't lose sight of that sort of broader body of knowledge and skill as we pay very important attention to the Common Core is one of the big challenges in front of us. It will be very unfortunate if the Common Core and the emphasis that's being placed on it squeezes out of the curriculum these other things that we've been talking about today.
Great. So, this is, this has really been presented, I think, by, the Education Policy Working Group, and would love to hear from both of you. And let me start with Jay this time. And obviously we have a number of funders whose intersection with policy, varies from national funders to more local funders. And it would be great if you could speak a little bit to how, what are key ways people can think about the policy frameworks, whether that's local policy or whether it's, statewide or national. What do we have to think about that are, supportive ways, supportive policies to expand on the good works that are being done by your organizations and others? And what are some of the barriers right now to this? And I think you've touched on some of them, but at a policy level, can I ask each of you to talk about one or two?
Sure. Yeah. This is Jay. And so, I think on a policy level, I think it's important that we think about metrics and that we think about not just the inputs but the outputs, and how is it that we are getting people ready. So if I think about in workforce development in particular, are we preparing people for jobs, and are we preparing them for careers that are pay a living wage? And so I think on a policy level of shifting our, and a focus on results and outcome-driven work, I think is incredibly important to the movement on that level. I think in the another policy level piece is how do we create these effective ecosystems to bring the different sectors together, and that's the part that I think kind of keeps me up at night and also is really exciting. Is that how is it that we bring these different groups together and create an effective ecosystem where we're sharing information and engaging sectors across those boundaries, and how is it that we break those silos down? I think is probably one of the most important things that we can be tackling right now, so that effective communication, that effective ecosystem. If I were to have a magic wand in 5 years' time, if we could establish that, then Europe goes away, and I'd gladly leave.
Great, Gary.
Yeah, I would echo Jay's emphasis on the importance of getting a lot clearer about the kinds of metrics that will influence the way we go about the business of school improvement and curriculum development and teaching and learning. I think it's so important to emphasize. You asked, Ann, what's one of the biggest barriers to crafting a new policy framework for this, at whether it's the federal level, the state level, the local level. One of the biggest barriers is that we all went to school. And by that I mean, we all carry a very, when I say we all, most of us, carry a very sort of traditional view of what schools should look like, what they should do, and it's very, very difficult to break out of that. And I think especially so given that the policy community, the research community, is very much dominated by people whose experience of education is overwhelmingly college preparatory, the experience of four-year college and university, and more often than not, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way, but rather a limiting way, the liberal arts side of the curriculum. So I would hope that as we approach policy making at the federal, state, local level, we can much more thoughtfully and systematically certainly engage industry in the policy work, but also the professions that are not well represented in the policy world or the world of academic research. And so I mean by that engineers, architects, doctors, lawyers, radiology therapists, industrial designers. Again, I mentioned the work of Dieter Rams and the classic principles of design that he advanced. That's missing from the experience of most policymakers, most academics, and I think as a result it has the effect of significantly narrowing the way we envision teaching and learning, not only in K-12, but throughout the education system.
Yeah, and I would add to that, Gary. I was just thinking that, if we could really focus on the integration of school and career, and recognizing the fluidity that they're not. I think sometimes set up this false dichotomy between the two, and that people will consume education, then they'll go into the workforce, they'll come back to consume more education, and that really reflects the reality for most people in our country, and making sure that we have systems and policies that recognize multiple pathways and allow for people to transition back and forth seamlessly would be incredibly important.
Great. So we have one more final question, and then I'm going to move to kind of some closing of what's been a really informative session. So I think as folks are listening to the presentations and hearing about the work that you're doing, I think a question that's come up is I think a good one. What about trying to scale the approaches and programs to, using, I think, to I3 recipients and using I3 mechanisms to do that? So let me open that up to both of you for comment. I would imagine that your answer would be absolutely, but I'll go to Jay. Do you want to start with that one, and then Gary goes through the I3 and the different mechanisms for that?
I mean, I think your suspicion was probably correct about that we definitely would love to be doing that through the I3 recipients. I think about how large this problem is, and I think about how it is that we talked about collaboration. I think that's sometimes overused and maybe too loosely, but the incredible importance of picking our heads up and finding ways to leverage each other's work. And so I think that's probably the most important thing that I see, and to recognize all the different players who can add to that conversation. I always turn the conversation to think about companies, because I think that was maybe the lens that I was asked to come to this conversation with. Mm-hmm. And I think what is incredibly encouraging is the willingness of those players to be at the table. And so how is it that we can find and leverage the common work that we do to have the greatest impact, because it's a huge issue that we're trying to solve.
Gary,
I would add to that, Ann. Obviously, I think I3 is certainly a set of opportunities that we need to pursue very aggressively. And I was very encouraged in the most recent I3 grant announcement that there was explicit recognition in the improving low-performing schools priority of the importance or the priority within that absolute priority given to approaches that address student engagement, student motivation, and other aspects of sort of non-cognitive learning that Jay also emphasized. That said, I think one of the challenges with I3, even though it's supposedly about innovation, in reality it's been mostly about replication. And I fully understand the importance that the department has placed on evidence. But there is a bit of a tension, if not a contradiction, between the need for evidence of success in order to justify the award of a grant. There's a tension between that and the desire to promote innovation, certainly at the validation level, if not the development level as well. So by all means, I think we all need to work hard to exploit that opportunity, but there are some real challenges around it.
Terrific. So I'm going to, first of all, thank you both so much for being with us. Your contributions, not only on the call today, but in your daily lives to improving outcomes for young people is profound. And I think that the conversation, there's so much there for folks to continue to, I think, dive into, seek further conversations with the two of you. These are the, I think, really a key question for the future is how we really do a better job of making all young people both college and career ready. And I think that in the spirit of GFE remaining committed to, helping as colleagues and as peer funders, our ability to identify strategies and solutions. And so I want to leave the group of our participants by asking some questions to take away as we're concluding the webinar, and before I turn it back over to Kimberlyn. I think part of GFE's work is really to continue to have funders learn and connect with each other and ask questions. The issues of dialogue, debate, continuous learning are at the center of GFE's work. So I think leaving you with some food for thought, and I think we've heard some great comments today that can further advance our thinking. But for the funders on the call, and obviously there's a range of folks I think that have joined us from family foundations, folks working locally at a national level. But I think helping to think through some, what are the compelling reasons for all of us to support college and career readiness, and for your foundation specifically, what would how and to what extent would your board see this as an important role to take on in the work that you're doing? I think second, what areas do your grant-making priorities and strategies align with the pathway concept, and certainly how that relates to higher education's implementation and capacity needs? If we're going to create these robust pathways, higher education needs to be as present as K-12. And certainly I think in terms of thinking through what Grantmakers can offer to ensure that students are career ready. And I think Jay's talked a lot about the ecosystems and the kind of relationships that need to be at play. How do we engage industry? What challenges do you see in supporting this kind of work in your context? And finally, how can you and other funders in your network leverage your convening power, which is always something that we have in our pockets to help key stakeholders better collaborate across segments of this pipeline to build these kind of ecosystems and to share and achieve a shared understanding of goals and the roles in achieving those goals, particularly to create these kind of robust pathways for young people that prepare them both for success in post-secondary and in career as we move forward. So again, thank you everyone who's dialed in, and I'm going to turn it over to Kimberlyn to provide some announcements from GFE.
Yeah, thanks so much, Anne. We really, really appreciate your leadership on today's webinar and as GFE's board chair. Before we all sign off, I'd like to take a brief moment to mention some of GFE's feature programs. First, our annual conference themed Philanthropy Rising to the Challenge, Leading a Nation More at Risk will be in Houston, Texas, October 16th through 18th. Secondly, GFE will offer 2 member briefings, the first of which is focused on early learning and dramatically improving outcomes for kids of color, poverty, and ELLs in the first 8 years. That will occur May 6th through 8th in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And then we have a second member briefing focused on collective impact, strengthening the practice of cross-sector collaboration, May 22nd through 24th at the Aspen Institute in Aspen, Colorado. Although registration has closed for both programs, please do keep your eyes peeled for grant-making strategies that might inform your work. And now for a few closing thoughts. First, as a reminder, the full webinar presentation will be available on GFE's website and/or via email. We'll also follow up later today to provide you with an evaluation of today's program. The survey is really short, so please do take a few moments to fill it out. Your comments do help us improve our programs. Thanks again, everyone, for participating, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Please stand by.